Well, it's not too many days that go by when I can't help but think how fortunate I am, how grateful I am. I meet so many people through the course of a day and just through the course of work in my life, and I'm always ever so grateful. You know, I can remember a time where a lot of the stresses that I have today were just nowhere in sight. And I had a very, very low bottom, being homeless for over a decade, strung out for over 2 decades. And now just when I think about of all of the amazing things God has done for me in my life, I can remember when I was a kid and the things that we used to dream about and the things that we thought that would be such an awesome thing to be able to do as adults, and being stuck for so long, never thinking any of those things would be possible. And now to be so strategically placed in so many different people's lives, to be a ray of hope and to help them to make their dreams become a reality, and even just to help them to be able to dream again or to begin dreaming in some cases. I so have such a great passion for the youth. And I feel if I can influence them at a younger age, it could possibly help them not to make some of the very mistakes that I made, and not to go down some of those roads at the beginning look so harmless and innocent, but at the end can be very detrimental to them being able to be productive members of society, as opposed to even reaching their dream. 1989, I left Buffalo, New York, came to San Diego, California, the place that never rains. Back in Buffalo, we had recently sold our family business, and so I had taken on a job at a concrete factory outside. It's about 26 below zero when I first came out here to San Diego. I came out purely for a vacation, started doing a little maintenance work around the condo that my family was living in at the time. And from there, I went and got a fence apprenticeship program, and where they taught us how to build fences and things of that nature. And that happened to be in Al Cajon City. So I went from Golden Hills to Al Cajon City. And as my life progressed and I became more independent, drugs and alcohol played a major role. And I worked at that job for about 3 years and found myself homeless. And that was the beginning phases of my homeless life. And I stayed homeless for quite a number of years. It started off with county jail, prison, and in 2003, I had got out of state prison, and I went to a drug facility program, and that was a changing point. I went to that program, found out it was 2003. I went there, found out in 2001 when I called home that my dad had passed away, and I didn't know, and I never will forget that day. And I hung the phone up after my sister had told me that, and the counselor says, "What happened?" I says, "Well, my dad is gone. He died in 2001." And I felt so empty. I couldn't show any emotion, and I felt so inadequate because my dad was my hero, and I wasn't there. And I remember praying to God, asking God, I said, "Please turn me back on, make me back normal again. I want to be able to grieve my father's death," and it happened. And they began to teach me about the psychological part of the human brain and emotions and feelings, and how that addiction had crippled me. And I says, if I can grieve my father's death, I can grieve that guy that came up in here. I said, I want to be different. I want to do something different. And I began to fight, not knowing what was ahead of me, but being able to make decisions not just based on how I feel was crucial. And so me helping other people get clean and sober and staying sober is something that happened. I went to a treatment program, stayed there for 7 months. After I left there, they strongly suggest that I go to a sober living, a controlled environment with no drugs and alcohol. And I took the suggestion, and the suggestion led me to Salvation Army STEPS program. And it was basically a year program, and they taught you how to save your money, charge you a fee, not rent at that time. And so I stayed there for 2 years when I was supposed to stay for 1. And I got a lot of flack from people. They said, "You're institutionalized, you're scared to leave." But in the back of my mind, I wanted to do my own thing. So when I left there, I had money, 2 trucks, and tools. And from that point, I said, "God, I don't want to pay rent. Can you make it so I can leave here and not pay rent?" And what did he do? He blessed me to be a manager of a 24-unit apartment complex. But what they hired me to do was to take back over the complex, because the kids were pulling knives on the potential people to come rent, and it was just off the chain. I often on stressful days go back to my bottom. The places where I slept on concrete, the dumpsters that I ate out of, and the establishments that ran me off from trying to eat out of their dumpsters and all of that. Because sometimes the stress of just the life that God has blessed me with today can sometimes seemingly be overwhelming. So I go back and I ride up those alleys, and I go back to those streets, and I see the people, and I'm quickly reminded of how blessed I am. And it just kind of like relieves that stress and that pressure of today, and makes me grateful all over, because I was in a very hopeless state of mind. And I had settled to be living out on the street. I settled for if I could just get some cardboard out of my mind, sleeping outside on the concrete, and for some reason, God decided to bless me and to allow me to experience life in a totally different way. I believe that God's love is universal. And I say it like that is because a lot of people that I mentor, a lot of people that I counsel have never even had a drug issue, but it's about hope. It's about not allowing the place where your environment where you grew up at, not allowing what you seen your mom and dad do, totally determine and dictate who you become. Because I didn't turn into an addict overnight. It was social use. It was funny at the little parties when I was young drinking alcohol. They said, "Man, this little 9-year-old boy, 12-year-old boy, now I'm 17 and I'm an alcoholic. Now I'm 14 beginning to experience weed, but now when I'm 20, I'm strung out on crack cocaine, alcoholic, and a pothead." The ministry, I don't know how I got into this ministry. I was so grateful, am so grateful that God has blessed me to be living the quality of life I'm living right now. And I can remember when I was first transitioning to the STEPS program, and I had no friends that I were able to hang out with. So what I did is that I lived at STEPS, but I went back to the program every day. And I began to mentoring the people coming through the program to help them where the hard areas that I had to be able to explain. And so then when I got my foundation, which was a spiritual foundation from my youth, then I began to help out people through different programs. Celebrate Recovery was the first program I really participated in early on, getting clean, hurts, habits, and hang-ups. And so that's a variety of things. It didn't just deal with drugs and alcohol addiction. And so that's how the ministry got birthed. I would go back to the program, bring people to the Celebrate Recovery. People that I knew, I would tell them about Celebrate Recovery. And then one day I looked up, I'm in the sanctuary, there's 100 people looking at me, and I'm ministering, talking about the things that God had done for me. And all at that moment, I'm like, is this a dream, or is this what my life's become? And I just been running ever since then. I want to show my appreciation by saying thank you to everyone who came out to attend tonight. And I also want to thank everyone who made all of the scholarships and this event and these type of events possible through your generous donations. We greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate it. The work that we are doing here is not free work, and it cannot be done without the faithful support that all of my donors have supplied me.